Donegan's lost year. That year he lived in Egbert Salsays on the corner of Piedmont and MacArthur. Outside a bronze plaque commemorated W.C. Fields, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. Inside, the clientele was mostly African American, but they didn't seem to mind Donegan's presence. He sat at the end of the bar, nodding into his gin and tonic, a lanky Caucasian in a cable-knit sweater who seemed always on the verge of setting his beard on fire when he smoked in front of the bar. One night he played a couple tracks off the only Dylan CD in the jukebox. He drew a few arch looks, heard a couple of Ofe motherfuckers, but this was 2010, not 1962, and they were content to leave him alone. Another night he skeezed a joint off the guys at the door, and after that they were fast friends. After a few months they let him mop behind the bar and take out the recycling for a few extra dollars after he paid his tab. It had started one night when he got changed for the laundry in his building, which was up the street on the low-rent side of MacArthur. Before he knew it, he was chatting up Zoe the bartender, the only other white face in the room, who wouldn't go to bed with him but sold him a roll of quarters, and within a week he'd taken up residence. By taking up residence, we mean he'd fallen off the wagon. He'd put together a few years here, a few years there, though this 18 months was his longest stint in recent memory. He knew if he ever kicked for good, Shelley would never let him back. She'd taken up with some artist across the bridge in San Francisco, or maybe he was an art student since you had to be living on someone else's dime to pay the rent over there. And Donegan liked to think of himself as biding his time. Bud was a light-skinned African-American with freckles, 43, a few years older than Donegan. He wore a silver trading jacket and cast disparaging looks up and down Piedmont Avenue, eyeballing the girls as they walked in and out of the bar. Terry, Bud's cousin, wore the uniform of a younger generation, low-slung jeans and a jacket that could have fit two of them, baseball hat turned sideways. He sold weed to pay his way through college, and he liked to show Donegan his medical marijuana card, claiming it made him legit. They gave Donegan a few hits of whatever they were smoking and bummed him the roach, which helped him nurse his hangover. Mornings were worse now that he wasn't working. Now that he wasn't working, he understood there was a countdown on his life. "You like the black coups or what?" Bud asked him one night, lips curling as he expelled marijuana smoke. Bud glanced at Terry, and Terry laughed, slapping his thigh. "No, man, our boy's got a wife," Terry said, howling with mirth. "For real?" Bud looked at Donegan, who shrugged, the ember of the joint disappearing into his unkempt red beard. He took an attenuated toke and held it, the acrid smoke clawing at the back of his throat until he coughed, tears stinging his eyes. He passed the joint to Terry. "I've got Shelley," he said, and he proceeded to describe the woman he'd been living with on and off for the last 7 years. 28 years old, an advertising executive with a thing for hopeless cases, she only dated men she could control, which meant alcoholics like Donegan or college kids like the one she'd taken up with last time Donegan strung together enough sobriety to declare emotional independence. Now that he'd fallen off the wagon, it was only a matter of time before she wanted him to come crawling back. "I told you so," Terry said, laughing while he passed the joint to Bud. "We're not actually married," Donegan explained, and he held up his hand, wiggling his fingers. "No vows." Bud shook his head. The bar door opened and a pair of girls floated out in a cloud of perfume, Toni Braxton swelling from the jukebox and fading again as the door swung shut. Bud watched their asses, one big, one small, a sun and a moon, as they walked up the street. Terry catcalled, and the thin one looked over her shoulder, rolling her eyes. Halfway up the block, the girls linked arms and crossed Piedmont, giggling as they climbed into a minivan. A few nights later, she turned up, and Donegan understood his days in Oakland were numbered. The conversation happened quickly over a gin and tonic and a dry vodka martini at the bar. "This kid's driving me crazy. I don't know how much longer I can put up with him." Shelley smiled ruefully at Donegan. "I don't know about letting you come home, though. Not in your condition." She patted his arm. "I'll change," Donegan told her. A hollow promise they both knew.